We had a great week here at the church, if you were able to be a part of it. We had over like 270 kids that were here for some of the events going on as we were taking part of our Dayspring Community Sports Camp, which is our version of Vacation Bible School. So a lot of kids came through, got to hear the gospel. And what I was more impressed with, though, was the amount of volunteers that we had from this church. There was like over 140 of you that volunteered. And I just want to say thank you. It makes me yeah. It's just so nice when you're able to have all those people volunteer, because it takes off a lot of work for other people and stuff. And so, again, thank you for that. Also, I wanted to let you know about a couple events we have coming up. This Saturday, we have the men's event, which they're having. You heard about the meat and stuff, and every time I hear that, like, Ken Syverson smoking the meat, I just can't think how he rolls it up and, he smokes it, but, whatever. So that's going to be it's going to be a good thing there. So make sure you sign up to come as well. And then Pizza with the Pastor is next Sunday. So if you want to spend some time just getting to know some of the staff and hear about the church, and if you're new or been here for a while but haven't yet made one, I'd love to have you come. Just make sure you sign up so we know about how much pizza to get. And not that we can't have too much, because I'll just take it home with me after we're done, and feed my kids with it, I guess, but would love to have you be a part of that. And then you saw that discipleship class. One of the things we've been talking about, we've experienced so many new salvations in the last couple of years that we wanted to be more intentional about our discipleship, bringing people a little bit farther along in what it means to be a follower of Christ. And we also understand that some of you are brand new to the church or brand new to faith itself, and so you're afraid to ask some questions or don't understand some things. And at times I have to be reminded, even the message today was like, oh, people may not know what that is, because you haven't been raised. This is a great place to come where you can ask what you may think is a stupid question, which isn't. Like, it's just allowing you to get to know more things. So it's going to be a non-threatening way to be involved. So that's going to be on Wednesday nights, starting July 31st from 6:30 to 8. Pastor Wayne's going to be doing the main study of it. Pastor Colleen and I will be there as well to help facilitate and answer any questions that you may have. But again, and afterwards, if you want to stop and talk to us for a while about any of the things we learned, we'd love to do that with you as well. So plan to be a part of that. We continue our study right now on what we're calling summer school. It's the idea of taking some of the maybe Bible stories that some of us are familiar with. For some of you, it may be new. We're going to be looking at Joshua today, and it's Joshua chapter 3 and 4. I have to tell you, when I was a youth pastor, one of the things I loved is I love the summer months, because the kids were out of school. You could spend a little bit more time with them. We would plan like certain events. We would do the youth camp. We would do some water parks. But one of the things that I really loved to do with them was I loved to take them camping. And I'm not a camping person, but there was something about getting away from all the technology, not having all the cell phone coverage, where all the devices were put away and you were just kind of all roughing it together. And so I love those moments, because there are things that kids did that were so insane. This one time we took all the meat that was left over and tried to make a hamburger out of it. And it was about this big. And man, it was as red as could be. And one of the kids started eating it. And I thought, he's going to get really sick. But luckily he didn't. Okay, so we have some of those things happen. But what I really love to do, because you were creating all these memories, I really like to take the kids canoeing as part of the camping trip, because so many cool things that happen on canoeing. And what's great about canoeing is it's pretty tame, but at the same time, it's never the same when you get out there. The waters are always different. The kids you take are always different. And matter of fact, even one of the stories I was thinking about actually had nothing to do with canoeing at first. It was just on our way there. But we took a couple of vehicles, and I was taking one of the church vans, and I was following up behind, and some of the other leaders were in front. And, we're just having fun. The kids were singing goofy songs. And as we were driving by, all of a sudden, it was like we passed this car going this way, and this car, man, just whipped around his vehicle as fast as he could, almost dangerously, and then started driving aggressively towards us, which I just thought to myself, well, they forgot something, or they need to get somewhere in a hurry. Well, we get into a little town along the way, and as we got stopped at a light, I look out. This guy goes into one of the parking spaces by some of the businesses, gets out of his car, runs up to one of the vehicles in front of me, and takes this piece of paper and just starts throwing it against the vehicle. And I was like, this guy's lost it. So I didn't know what was going on. Well, then I got in, we got to the area where we were canoeing, and I think Eric Clemson was driving the vehicle, and I said, Eric, what happened? He's like, okay, so I guess what happened is one of the kids was in the passenger side, and he had a wad of paper, and I guess he threw it up, and it was from the other side. Well, it went into the guy's vehicle as he was passing by because he had his window down and scared the guy, almost made him wreck. And so he was taking it out on our van with a wad of paper, I guess, so, and I was like, so then I was upset, but we still have that moment because it was such a kind of crazy experience. But when you get into the canoeing part, what I loved is you would take kids that had never ever did canoeing, and so we had 2 of these guys, and it was great because they must have not known much about canoeing, because when they got in the canoe, they were facing each other, and then they started paddling. And they just went around like this. And they were like, we can't get anywhere. And we're like, well, it might help if you face the same way, So again, I'm not an expert on it. I just thought they might want to know that. And I have to tell you, I was not actually always comfortable with canoeing myself because I don't know how to swim. So water, the depth of it, although with me being short, the depth doesn't have to be real bad before I feel like I'm going to drown, But I don't like all that stuff. But when we would get in the canoe, I would make sure that I had on the life preserver. It was never going to leave me at all. But we would get in these canoes, and, it was great watching just different things happen and watch the way the kids handled stuff, because there would be sometimes you would go in and the depth would be just great. You would just kind of flow down the river. You wouldn't have to do even much paddling because it would just kind of push you along the way. And it was kind of a nice, easy thing. And people were splashing water and trying to dunk each other and, just having all these cool events. But then there were some areas on that river when we'd be going down it that was, maybe they didn't get enough water, or maybe it was a little shallow in that area, and you would feel your canoe sort of drag into some of the rocks. And at times, you would have to get up, you'd have to pick up your canoe, and you'd have to move it along the way, which was a little bit more work. You saw certain areas where were tighter than others, and it was always fun because some of the girls, like, they would start getting close to some of these trees that were sticking out, and they were afraid of spiders or snakes, and, so they would be getting near it. And, of course, somebody would always do this. They would put, like, a fake snake on a string in the water and watch as people come by, and they would flip out and stuff, then they'd pull it back, but you'd have these girls that were nervous about getting too close, and so you'd have these winding areas. You would have other areas where, like, it was a little bit more rapids, and those would make me nervous because you didn't know where you're going to go, get pushed along the side. We had one of our canoes, one of the guys, there was one time we went canoeing, there was only 3 of us. I don't know what happened, but there's only 3 of us that went, so it was me and 2 kids. And the one kid, he was standing in the middle of the boat, and he saw the rapids, and he jumped out, and the canoe tipped over, and then it wedged us against the bank because of the way that things were going. And the one kid looks at us, and he goes, I'm too small to move this canoe. And so he left it up to me and this girl that was with me, and she's stronger than me. And so we flipped the canoe over, got back in, and it was safe. But you would also have some of these areas, which probably more or less made me a little bit more nervous. But I remember one of the guys was out of his canoe, and he was walking along, and the water was about up to here. But I don't know what happened, but he took another step, and all of a sudden he just disappeared. And he came up, and I was like, that's why I don't get out of the boat right there, because I'm too small. And I thought, because the water, all of a sudden just went way over his head. And I thought to myself too, that's why I always wear the life vest, because I know I can't swim. And so I know the only way for me to be safe is to be in that life vest. And I have to tell you, there have been times when I've been knocked out of my boat and I've been in that life vest, and there are times when I struggle and I try to fight to get to another area, and at times I've realized I just have to let go, let the life vest do its thing until I can get beside a little bit of the land to where I can get out and walk out and be safe. And as I was thinking about sort of life, I was thinking about how many times that we come to these rivers that we have to cross in our life, which sometimes can be okay. It's nice, life is going good, and it's easy to travel on, and we like the view, and we like everything we're seeing. But then there are times when, life has its twists and turns. It gets a little bit narrow, and all of a sudden we feel like we're tied down to something, and we have to make these decisions, and we're afraid if I make the wrong decision, like, what's it's going to cost me? I think there's other times when we're going through life, and it feels like everything is very shallow. We feel like we're dragging bottom, and for whatever reason we have to get out, and life feels a little bit more tough, like we have to do a little bit more work. I think there's other times when we feel the rapids and the pressures of life, and we don't know what to do with that. And then I honestly believe that there are times when we feel like things are just over our head. We just feel like life is just taking us down, and we just don't know how to do this. And I have to tell you, that's for me the importance of Jesus Christ in my life, because he's my life preserver. He's the thing that at the end of the day that I've got to hold tight to. He's the thing that helps me keep my head above water. And there are times that I struggle and I fight with him, and I cause myself to do more work, and a lot of times God just needs me to give up and let him take control until he can get me to a safe place where I can get out and be right where he wants me to be. And as I was looking at this passage today, I couldn't help but think, and I want to read this passage because this is about the people of Israel really going through the river or the waters a second time. We already know that Moses took them through once, and now Joshua gets to do the same thing. So let's read this passage together in chapter 3 verses. We're just going to start with verses 1 through 5. We are going to do 2 chapters today, so we'll try to get through as quickly as we can. It says, early in the morning, Joshua and all the Israelites set out from Shittim and went to the Jordan, where they camped before crossing over. After 3 days, the officers went throughout the camp, giving orders to the people, when you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God and the Levitical priests carrying it, you are to move from your positions and follow it. Then you will know which way to go, since you have never been this way before. But keep a distance of about 2,000 cubits between you and the ark. Do not go near it. Joshua told the people, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you. So we're going to go to prayer at this time, but I also want to ask that as you and I pray today, it was like, I don't know, last night when I got the news about, being a little bit of an assassination attempt on Trump, and I thought, we're so divided in this country, and the idea that somebody would physically try to take somebody else's life because of views, I'm like, we got problems, right? And I'd say, I don't even care what side of the aisle you're on. I just know that every leader out there needs God. We tend to pray specifically for our parties. I'm telling you, we need to pray for all people, that they will have a listening ear to God. And even though I'm thankful for the protection that this wasn't carried out, somebody died in this situation. And today, somebody's without a family member. And so we need to keep that family in prayer as well. So let's just remember this in our prayer time. And I want to encourage you as a church, as believers, let's continually pray for our leaders out there, that God will get a hold of their lives, that they'll have a listening ear, and that he would protect them. And so let's pray together. Father, I think about Joshua, and he was stepping into a leadership position, and he was having to carry over for Moses, who was a great leader. And I know that he was probably a little bit nervous, not sure if he was up to the task. But in this passage, as we'll talk about later, you say that you're going to exalt him. In other words, you're going to put him in the same place that you put Moses. And Father, we're living in a world where leadership constantly changes. People are having to deal with new pressures. And I don't even know personally why anyone would ever want to go into an elected office, because I think it's just a dangerous, thankless task that so many do. And maybe people abuse, and maybe they're not in the right place. And Father, right now, I want to pray for our leaders. I want to pray that you would come near them. I want to pray that you would protect them. I want to pray that you would give them good health. But I pray that you would give them a good mind. And I pray that their thoughts would be drawn to you, and that they would do things for the people and not themselves. And I pray for this family today who is without a loved one, for a senseless, stupid thing, because somebody didn't agree. And I pray, Father, that you would come near that family, let them know that they are loved and supported, and help them during this time. I not only pray for our leaders in our nation, but I pray for our leaders in this church, and I pray for every person in here that is a leader within their home. Father, help us to do things for the right reason, and because we serve a God who is just and loving. And so, Lord, if even today as we're preparing this and looking at this message, I pray if there's any junk in our own lives, that we would clean it up today, knowing that we need to turn those things over to you. Father, if there's anything I get wrong in the interpretation of the passage today, I pray that you would clean it up in the ears of your people, so that your voice is the one they hear and not mine. In your name we pray. Amen. So as I was talking about this first passage, I want to give you a little bit of the background, because I'm not sure that we, some of you maybe new to church may totally understand what's going on. But you have the people of Israel who had been wandering for some time now. It says about 40 years. And they were getting ready to go into a land that God had promised them. If you remember, the people of Israel were in bondage in Egypt, and a leader was raised up by the name of Moses. Moses was to lead the people out, and God told him he would be with them. And the people saw that God was with them. Why? Because they saw the plagues that would happen. Moses would go to Pharaoh, who was in charge of the Egyptians, and he would say, "Hey, Pharaoh, I need you to let the people of Israel go. If you don't, this is the plague that God's going to send your way." And so it was plague after plague after plague. And each time, Pharaoh would say, "I might let your people go, and if you take away this plague," and they would. And then he says, "I'm not going to let them go." And each time Moses would have to come and say, "Pharaoh, you got to let these people go, or these are the things that are going to continue to happen." And you remember that the final plague was that they were to lose the firstborn of every male son that didn't put the blood on their door frames. And all these people in Egypt lost their oldest sons, and they lost some of their oldest cattle and sheep and stuff, all because they didn't believe in God. And that opened Pharaoh's heart enough to say, "You know what? Fine, go ahead and take your people." Well, when Moses started taking the people, we realized that Pharaoh had a change of heart, and he began to send his armies after Moses and after Israelites, and he was going to bring them back or destroy them. But it says that Moses stood before the Red Sea, and this is sort of the image we have. And as he was standing before the Red Sea, it says that he put down his staff, and the water separated, and the people went across on dry ground. When they got to the other side, and the Pharaoh's armies came, then the waters went on them, killing those men who came after them. And the people of God saw the work of God in a miraculous way. But these people of God who saw God do this miraculous thing, they got very aggravated as they were making their way to the promised land. Matter of fact, they were grumbling and complaining. They didn't like that their water sources. They didn't like how long the journey was taking. They didn't like that they didn't have certain foods. And they would continually cry out to Moses. And then Moses would come in and say, "Okay, here's the deal. I'll go to God." And he would go to God, and God would provide the manna, or he'd provide the food, or he'd provide the water. And then the people would eat that for some time, but then they would get tired of it, and they would say, "Well, we want something else. This isn't good enough." And they would keep complaining over and over and over again. And they just weren't accepting sort of the things that had been provided for them, and they just kind of fell into this sort of negative place. And matter of fact, they were in such a bad place, and they wanted to take things in their own control, that eventually, while they were wandering around, it said that Moses was up on the mountain, and he was receiving the commands from God. And as he was receiving the commands from God, they decided that they wanted to build an idol. And they thought, we want to bow down and we want to worship something. So instead of worshiping God, they decided that they'd create their own God. And they came up with a great plan. We're going to bow down to a cow. I mean, that was what was in their thinking. Like, that makes a lot of sense, right? Cows do a lot of great things. So that's what they want to bow down to. And you and I are looking at this saying, that is so insane. But as we talked about last week, some of us have some insane idols in our lives as well that we need to tear down. And so anyways, God gets upset with this. Moses gets upset with this. But you can see the people grumbling and complaining over and over. And God is tired of their attitude. Matter of fact, when they come to what the promised land was to be, you remember that 12 spies were sent out. 10 came back saying, "We can't do this thing. We can't defeat these people. These people are big. There's a lot of stuff there, a lot of things that would be great, but these people are too big. We cannot overcome them." And what they were doing is they were diminishing the power of God. But yet you had two people, Joshua, who we're reading about today, and Caleb, who said, "No, we can do this thing." But God says, since you didn't believe and since you doubt, he said this, he said, because of the 40 days that it took you to explore, then for each year that represented a day, that's how long you're going to be wandering around. And most of you that said that you didn't believe, you're not even getting into the promised land. And so that begins to see what we see begin to happen. And I have to tell you, when I was reading this, I couldn't help but think to myself, like, how you and I forget how blessed we are at times. I thought about, like, and I'm not just talking about you as an, I'm talking about me as well. Like, how many times do I complain and I grumble because I want more? How come I can't be satisfied with what God has given me? I think this came to a bigger realization this week as I heard back from my daughters who are in Jamaica right now, representing, part of the church as well and being over there. And they called back and they're like, Dad, it's hot. We don't like the food. And we were getting some chicken stuff the other day with like a soup, and there was bones in the soup and stuff. And what they didn't realize is they have to use every part of the animal because they just don't have what we have here. And I remember praying that, Lord, I hope they get it, but I thought, man, yeah, it's so easy to complain and to grumble, and then we forget how blessed that we are. I mean, you and I are extremely blessed. And I wonder if God doesn't get tired of us saying, boy, I've given them so much, and they continue to grumble, and they continue to complain. And that's a bad place that they sat in. And if you look at sort of my first point, what I want you to know is that they were camping out in this junk, and it was time for God to clean things up for them. They were sitting in sort of these bad places, and I think that from time to time, you and I sit in these bad places. You and I think we don't have it good enough, or we want more. Or some of us think, that our lives are a mess, our families are a mess, work is a mess, and we look at all these negative things in our life, and sometimes we sit in that negative place, don't we? And I've even thought to myself, like, there are times that you and I need to step back and say, I can't camp out here anymore. Like, I need to have God do a work in my life that says to myself, like, you need to look at things differently, and you need to respond differently than you used to. Like, what's amazing about this passage is they went out, and if you saw the conversation beforehand, God told Joshua, look, I'm going to give you the land now. You're going to go in and destroy these people. And he says, but first of all, I'm going to exalt you. And so he was raising up these things. But Joshua, before they even went into battle, before they even crossed the Jordan River, in verse 5, it says, Joshua told the people, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you. Now, what he was asking them to do when he asked them to consecrate themselves is, this was a time when they would physically go into a river, they would physically wash their bodies, they would take off all the filth, all the dirt off of their bodies, and they would come up clean. And it was symbolism for them to say, not only do I want you to wash yourselves physically, but when we talk about consecration and when you're in the water and you're doing these maneuvers of washing your body, I also want you to think internally and ask God to come into your life and reveal any junk that's in there. And as he's revealing that, say, Lord, take this as well and clean my inside up just like my outside. David had this moment, you remember, when he said, oh Lord, search my heart. If you find anything that's wrong, then reveal it to me. And you and I need to have these moments of consecration where we look at ourselves and say, Lord, what's going on? What do I need to change? Am I being faithful in my marriage? Am I being good to my kids? Am I being the person at work that I need to be? Have I responded to people in the appropriate way? Have I had some negative thoughts, or have I been in a bad place? Lord, what are those things? Reveal it to me so that I might be cleaned up. And that's what consecration is all about. And I think that you and I need to have like daily moments of consecration. I think we need to have times where God can just speak to us and say, here's the area I need to look at. And I have to tell you, when I sit in those moments, man, I have some very convicting moments that are full of grace. Where God says, I want to change how you think and how you perceive things. And I thought about that because even when our kids come back from these trips, even when we have missionaries come in Sunday, you know what the first questions we ask them are? How bad was it? What was some of the crazy stuff you saw? What was some of the worst things you ate? You know what we're telling them to do? Tell me about all the bad stuff. And I got really convicted about that. Because what we should be saying when they come back is, hey, how did you see God move? What did you like about the country? What did you like about the people? What have you learned to appreciate? And when we do that, we're consecrating ourselves, and what we're asking people to do is quit looking at all the bad, but start looking at the good. And when we raise up generations to do that, then they'll start to notice the more good in people. It's so easy for us, and I bet you'll even have these conversations. It's amazing to me when we get together as families or we get together back from trips. Some of us, instead of talking about all the good things that happen, some of us will talk about, oh, this was rough, this was hard. And then somebody else will be like, oh, you think that was bad? Let me tell you what we experienced. And then it's like we have to overdo each other, right? And the truth is, what if we just celebrated the good that's happened? What if instead of looking at other people, instead of finding all their flaws, what if you started looking for the good in people? And what if we started training our kids? What if we started training the people around us to look for the good in people instead of the bad? I'm so thankful I have a God that looks at what's good in me and trusts me. And so you and I have to come to these moments of consecration where we see the junk and then we allow God to clean it up. We get into the next verses and we go through verses 6 through 13. And so Joshua said to the priests, take up the ark of the covenant and pass on ahead of the people. So they took it up, went ahead of them. And the Lord said to Joshua, today I will begin to exalt you in the eyes of all Israel so that they may know that I am with you as I was with Moses. Tell the priests who carry the ark of the covenant, when you reach the edge of the Jordan waters, go and stand in the river. Joshua said to the Israelites, come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God. This is how you will know that the living God is among you, and that he will certainly drive out before you the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, and the Jebusites. See, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth will go into the Jordan ahead of you. Now then, choose 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one from each tribe. As soon as the priests who carry the ark of the Lord of all the earth, set foot in the Jordan, its waters flowing downstream will be cut off and stand up in a heap. Now, I love this sort of passage because what it's getting to is God basically has this conversation with Joshua, and he says, Joshua, I know that you're taking over for Moses. And I know that the people know that God was with Moses. And he said, just as God was with them, I'm going to show the people that God is with you as well. And so he says, I'm going to exalt you. And the word exalt means to grow. And what I want us to know is the Lord wants you to grow. The Lord wanted Joshua to grow, because I'm sure Joshua had doubts like, how do I be half the leader that Moses was? I mean, God, when you were with Moses, he sent all these plagues. God, when you were with Moses, like he parted the Red Sea. I don't know that I have the ability. Now listen, I want to change your thinking on that, by the way. It wasn't Moses who parted the Red Sea. It was God. And when Joshua stands in front of the water, it's not going to be Joshua who does the work either. It's going to be God. But he told Joshua, I'm going to show the people that I am with you just like I was with them. Now, this is one of those messages, by the way, that I used to do often at funerals. And the reason why we do it at funerals is because one of the things I saw with families is a lot of times you would spend time with people and they would talk about their mom or their dad and how valuable that they were in their life and everything that they meant to them. And it's a powerful moment. But a lot of them think, I don't know what I'm going to do without mom and dad. Like, I don't know that I can be the parent that they were. You know, and I get that because and it's funny because when you're a kid and somebody tells you, like, for example, a lot of people would say, man, you look just like your dad. And I'm like, okay, those are fighting words. All right, like, I know I'm much better looking than that, you know, like, no. But there were times when people come up to me and they would say, you know, you're sarcastic or you're funny like your mom. And I'm like, no, you know, I am not her, you know. But it was funny to me because the older I get, the more that I relish those moments when people say, you know what, you're like your mom or you're like your dad. And I think to myself, I don't feel like I could ever be like them. And I have to tell you, there are probably some of you, like I've explained from time to time, when I feel like a failure as a parent, like I can't do enough or I don't direct the right way, or I'm afraid I'm messing things up. And I want to tell you this, God is trying to grow you as a leader. And you and I need to understand, even as parents, that God gave you those kids, right? You know why? One of the reasons why we're opposed to abortion, because we believe that every life is a gift from God. So if God gave you that gift, he believes that you're able to raise them the right way. You have the ability to do that. And you and I need to grow in that. I will not get everything right as a parent, but I will grow in that. It's funny how you'll find out from people who probably live their life sort of recklessly. They have kids, and it's like they started to get things together. Because God brought that person in their life to help change them as well. Because God believes in you. And it's not just a kid thing. God believes you can grow in your leadership wherever you're at. Whether you're in your schools, whether you're in your homes, whether you're in your work. God has put you there in order that you can grow and help those around you to grow as well. We get in the next passage there, and we're in verses 14 now through 17. It says, "So when the people broke camp to cross the Jordan, the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant went ahead of them." Now the Jordan is at a flood stage. That's important. The Jordan is at a flood stage all during the harvest. Yet as soon as the priests who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing. It piled up in a heap a great distance away at a town called Adam in the vicinity of Zarethan, while the waters flowing down to the sea of Arabath, that is the Dead Sea, was completely cut off. So the people crossed over opposite Jericho. The priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord stopped in the middle of the Jordan and stood on dry ground while all Israel passed by until the whole nation had completed the crossing on dry ground. Now, there's something that I'd never seen in here, and I don't know why, but I love the way God reveals himself. But interesting enough, the first thing I want you to know, if you hear us talking about the Ark of the Covenant, because some of you may not know what that is, that's basically the 10 Commandments that were basically enshrined in this thing that they would carry from place to place. And only the people who were really the most holy or clean or presentable could carry that Ark. That's why he says, I want you to stand a considerable distance away, because if you touch the Ark, you would then die from being in the presence and the holiness of God. All right, so those are kind of the things that happen. So they were carrying the 10 Commandments, but what I had never seen until this moment is this, that it says that waters were at a flood stage. In other words, it was a lot of water. And so what we get to see is God shows himself in a big way. But listen, when did the water stop? Not until they stepped in, which I think is important. This is just something I learned. Because when Moses stood before the waters and put his staff down, the waters separated and then they went through. The waters didn't stop until the priest stepped in with the Ark of the Covenant, and then the waters went and heaped up in different areas. Now that's pretty powerful. Why is that powerful? Because you and I need to step in and watch God move. So I think that there are things that God is asking or calling us to do, but so many of us are afraid to step in. And because we never step in, we never get to see the power of God. If the priests just waited, that water could have stayed there forever. But they had to step in to a flooded water and watch God move. And so they did, and because of it, they all saw the miracle, and that's when the people knew that God was with them. And I have to tell you, church, there are times when I have had moments where I have trusted God and seen him move. Just recently, as I was thinking about this, the first message, there was somebody in our church that needed help financially, and I couldn't get a hold of the treasurer, and we thought it was a pretty unique situation. And I wrote a personal check. And thought, I just thought, well, I think I can take care of most of this. But honestly, with my own account, I was probably about $200 short. But so we're just going to do this thing. And I didn't tell my wife because I want to get in trouble with her, So I just did this thing. What was crazy to me is we had a group of guys that have been meeting at the church on Thursday mornings. People from different churches, and for whatever reason, they had been taking a collection for like a month, and I didn't know this. They handed me a card the morning after I wrote the check, and when I got the card and opened it, there was $200 in there. You see, God already knew. He just needed me to step in. And I went back and told that group, because I have to tell you, when I opened up that envelope and saw $200 worth of cash, it was so emotional for me, because God moved in a crazy and unique way. And I would love to tell you that because of that, my faith is huge and high. But listen, I'm part of an accounting family, and we count the cost. We don't get into debt. We don't get into certain things without counting the cost. That's just the way we're wired. And so I have to tell you that extreme faith is very difficult for me. And extreme faith as a pastor is very difficult for me. Because I also believe that God is calling this church to do some things, but I'm sitting there counting the cost and saying, man, I don't know if we'll be able to afford, I don't know if we'll be able to do that. And church, I have to remember, and it reminded me this week, that God may call us out to do some things that are significantly bigger than what we think we can do. And we just have to watch as God blesses. And he said, Chuck, I showed you in the little things. Now I need you to trust me in the big things as well. And church, listen, you need to have those defining moments. You need to have those moments because some of you, like, you've probably been dating that person for years and years and they've never asked to marry. Let's get married. Not me and you, I mean just you and that person, okay? Why don't you take a step of faith out on that? Because you're counting the cost and saying, I can't do it. Some of you are worried about having kids right now because you're carrying the cost and don't know how you can do it. Listen, if God gives you the kids, he'll help you take care of them. And that's why you have to step out in faith. There are some of you that are thinking about job situations or you've had other opportunities come up, but you're afraid to step in because you're carrying the cost and God just wants you to step in. Some of you in your relationships, some of you need to step in and get some help. You need to step into it and watch what God does. James 2:17 reminds us that faith without works is dead. In other words, you can have all the faith you want, but unless you're willing to step out, you're never going to see the wonder and amazement of God. We get in the last chapter there, and I'm not going to read the whole thing because I'm running out of time here, but Joshua 4, verses 1 through 24, basically this is what happens. They get in the river and they see that it's separated, and as they're walking across, remember they were asked to choose 12 men, right? And I don't know what kind of men they're choosing, but I know that if I was like in charge of one of the tribes, I'd be like, let's get our biggest and strongest guy. Because I know how guys are and I know how people are, right? And listen, dude, when we put you in that riverbed and you find a rock, you better pick up the biggest one you can, you know? And I'm sure those guys are getting in there. And if I know guys like are competitive as they are, there's probably a guy picking up a rock. He looks at the other guy, he's like, man, that one's bigger. So he's probably finding a bigger one to carry across as well, you know? They bring these stones across the river after they've seen this miracle of God, and they're told to lay those stones on the other side. And we know it's significant, we know it's meaningful because Joshua told the people, when your kids see these 12 stones and they will begin to ask why those stones are there, we want you to remind them of the work God did in getting the people across the Jordan, of being with the people out of bondage, getting them into the promised land and defeating these armies. We want you to remember those moments. There's something significant for us about having stuff that we remember. That's why God gave us our mind. You know, I have all those great stories going with teens on different events and youth camps and stuff. Why? Because they bring back memories, and I can see the way that God showed up there, and so I know he's going to show up here as well. There are times when I have to be reminded about the way that God blessed me with like a $200, because when God asked me to give over here, I can say, I remember that God helped me there, so I know he'll help me here as well. And you and I have got to have those moments that are significant of memory. You know, we need to have those moments when somebody says to us, well, where did you get that from? And you need to tell them, well, I got that from my mom or I got that from my dad. But there are things in your life when people ask you, how are you able to love so faithfully? Yeah, I get that from my dad. My Heavenly Father, he taught me how to love well. I don't understand why you don't get mad at everything else when everybody else at work is being lazy, not doing the work and getting aggravated stuff. I don't understand how you're able to just pass it by. You're like, yeah, I've been walking with Jesus, and he taught me how to do that. I don't understand how you're so able to give so freely and be able to help so many people and be able to forgive so easily, and you can point back and you say, yeah, I've been reading my Bible. And there are some moments that have just hit me, and they've been so profound. And you can remember those moments, and there's significance in remembering those moments because they're so powerful. I told First Service that when I was in college, there was a thing that I was, a sin that I was struggling with, and I just couldn't get past it, and I just kept praying to God, and as a way to remember not to sin in a certain area, I had a cross, and it was made out of 2 nails, and it had this, the thing that connected it to like a sort of a necklace type thing that I would wear around my neck, and you know, it was pretty solid in there, and I would pray every morning, you know, that God would remind me not to give in to this, and so that cross represented a lot for me. Now, I hate to be too descriptive here, but that cross was pretty significant for me for a couple of reasons. One, it was big, and so it was constantly on me. But I hate to share this with you, but I'm a very hairy dude. Okay, so that cross would be right there, and sometimes that cross would get caught in my hair, and if it would pull it, and I'd be like, okay, Lord, I know you're with me, type thing, and so I would have that. But I'll never forget, there was a season where I had gotten past this temptation, and I put on the cross one morning, and as I put on the cross, it actually fell to the ground and separated from this thing that was pretty solid. And it was as if the Lord just said to me, this is done. It's been taken care of. But I have that moment that I can continue to look back on and say, God, thanks for showing up here. And because you showed up here, I know that you're going to show up over here as well. And you and I have got to remember to tell those stories. It's important for our kids to hear those stories. It's important for them to know the difference God made in your life. Before God, this is the way I was. But God showed up, and I stepped in, and he showed up. And I know that he can do the same for you. Mom and Dad, how are you able to keep your marriage together? Couldn't do it on our own. But God showed up and has strengthened us in this way. And we just wanted to let you know the difference that God can make. Hey, Mom, Dad, how are you not able to lose your faith in the midst of the sicknesses and the diseases that are going your way? Because I have such a love for God. He's been so faithful to me. I know that even in the midst of what I'm going through, God's going to be faithful. And you and I are sharing our faith with those around us. And what a great thing to know that they can find security in those moments. They passed it down to their children, and they passed it down to their children. And you and I need to do the same with the people around us as well. So let's stand together, church. Let's pray together. Father, for your word and for moments of getting into it, we thank you for sharing these stories that happened, over 3,500 years ago. And the recognition of these events that happened and the way that you showed up makes us aware that even in the midst of what we're going through, even in the times we feel like life is we're getting in over our heads, that you become that preserver. You become that thing that is wrapped around us and allows us to keep our head above waters. And when people say, I don't understand in the midst of this tragedy how you're able to get through it, we can say, it's only because of God's grace. And I know that he loves me, and I know that I'm valued, and I know that I'm his child, and he keeps my head above water. So I pray for those who might be going through situations in life where they say, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I don't know how I'm going to cross this river. How I'm going to get to the other side. Father, I pray that they would just cling to you in this moment. And instead of fighting you along the way, maybe they just surrender their lives to you. And then, Father, as people ask, maybe we remind them that, nope, we couldn't do these things alone. But we have a God who loves us. So thank you for meeting with us today. Pray for all the situations going on, for sicknesses going on, for mental issues going on. For people that just need to feel loved and accepted and valued. I pray that they would feel that today. In your name we pray. Amen. Hey, church, leave blessed today, and we'll see you next week.